Hold on, I have to turn it so I can see myself. Because the first time I recorded this, I wasn't even in frame. Well, I wasn't in focus, I should say. The second time, I forgot to hit record. And we are here, third time's the charm, baby. All right, so what is up, my girl bosses, my gatekeepers, and my gaslighters? It is now the spookiest month of the year, better known as October. Second spookiest would be January. It's a little weird, it's a little kooky. Now, what the fuck are we talking about today? Now, if you saw the title below, hopefully they haven't changed the YouTube layout again. It's still below. We're talking about Giallo. Now, what the fuck is a Giallo? Now, I'm glad you asked that question, viewer. If you also saw the title, Giallo is Italian for yellow, but it is also a subgenre of horror. Now, technically, this title is extremely misleading. Now, why the fuck would I mislead you, viewer? I'm glad you asked, because it's all semantics. So, Giallos are technically a subgenre of horror. A subgenre of horror that was adapted from Il Giallo Matadori, a collection of Italian paperback novels that were focused on translating mystery or mystery works from other parts of the world, so England, America, Europe. Now that you know that, and you know what Il Giallo Matadori is, aka yellow, you now know what Giallo is. Now, why did I say calling it a subgenre is misleading? Again, because it's all just semantics. That being said, Giallo is technically not a subgenre. It is a filmmaking movement. Now, what is the difference between a movement and a subgenre, you may ask? A movement is something that is a group of works that are categorized not only in their similarity, but due to the fact that they could have only come out during that certain point in time at that certain place, aka something like the French New Wave, Korean New Wave, or the American slasher movement, which we will briefly talk about later on in this video. All right. So now that we got these things out of the way, what makes a Giallo special and why is it important? Well, I am glad you asked. So Giallos are really unique in the fact that they follow the format, tempo, and pacing of thriller films, but because they focus on the kill, they are technically horror films.
Something Italian style. I most invented this because I was one of the first to do that. This is Giallo. It's something difficult to explain. Some thriller, but with the involved the psychology and psychoanalysis, something inside. Beautiful woman. This is Giallo.
Now, why is this important? Because a lot of people will talk about Giallo films. They'll spit it up, bro. They'll put it out on the internet, be like Giallo. But here's the gag, here's the tea. You can't call something like Suspiria or Phenomena a Giallo. Why is this? Because one, they were not adapted from yellow paperback novels, and two, they feature supernatural elements, and Giallos did not feature supernatural elements, my friend. I don't know why I'm talking like a YouTuber, bro. I'm like in mad YouTube mode right now. Hello, it is me, Cinema Massacre. Anyways, that being said, Giallos, super cool, super tight, arguably like the most important filmmaking movement as far as horror is concerned. Legitimately speaking, Giallos kind of laid the foundation for horror that we know today by focusing on the kill. Prior to this, you had something like the Universal Monster joints, which were more focused on humanizing the character. And again, Giallos led to the most popular filmmaking movement in America as far as horror is concerned. I don't know why I said the most popular filmmaking movement in America. The most popular horror filmmaking movement in America, which is the slasher film movement. Oh no, I just walked out of frame. That being said, these slasher films owe everything and are extremely indebted to Giallo. All right? That being said, bro, shouts out The Exorcist, bro. Fire film. Let's talk about the history of Giallo. No, The Exorcist has nothing to do with Giallo. I just wanted to power level on you for a little bit. Yes, I really do be fucking with them Yes, I do really be fucking with them horror film joints, all right? And now that I've said my piece, let's talk about the history of Giallo, or Il Giallo Matadori. Giallo.
Vegeta, what does the scouter say about his power level? It's over 9,000!
Alright, so what is up? So, time to talk about some Giallos. Okay, so the thing about Giallos is that to understand why Giallos themselves are so significant, we must first talk about days before Giallo.
It's the last days to the rodeo. Last night had me down in the bag, comatose. Don't think sunshades and a pill gon' help. Once I'm gone, can't tame myself.
Giallo. Now, horror in both America and Italy, yes, we have to talk about both because Giallos were exported extremely heavily, which we'll talk about later in what influenced Giallos and kind of why they have the tone and a lot of the features they have. Them shits, right? Horror movies back in the day. So horror at this point in time was not horror as we know it today. It was more gothic, kind of theme and tone rather than the text that we now think of, which makes up horror. So horror back then was more like universal monsters, right? So like think about how like that dude Frankenstein was like, oh my god, like I can't be, they think I'm different, they think I'm weird. And it was about the fact that like he was an outsider, and tonally it's different than like The Final Destination, right? Because The Final Destination is more so like a horror, you die, stuff like that, right? So that is kind of how horror was before Giallo. It was more so fantasy rather than death and murder, which is what we think of like horror movies today as, right? So this is both true for Italy as well as America, but kind of not so much Italy. So in Italy they had stuff like I, Vampiri, and like Hercules and like The Dark World, right? And there's this really great quote from Mario Bava. So I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it to you. Let me see. I gotta check my notes. I have like 5 pages of notes. Wow. Educated, learning, scholarly. So this quote comes from a 1969 interview with Mario Bava for Horror Magazine, which is the fakest sounding magazine I've ever heard of. That being said, in the US, they don't like horror without creatures, i.e. why slashers took. I think that's my note, right? So why slashers took over. And yes, Giallos did influence the slasher movement. Bay of Blood, which we will talk about later. So, from a psychological point of view, the monsters don't work with our Italian audience. There's always a funny guy, meaning that dudes would just crack up and be like, oh, you want to suck my blood? That's gay. But like in Italian, so it'd be il spaghetti, tomato, garlic, zoo. That was Italian laughter. That being said, y'all ever do that, YouTubers? You ever like take your notes and then start looking at them too much? Because I want to make sure I do a good job. All right, so listen, Giallos tonally, they follow a format. Why do I keep like whipping my fucking neck? Anyways, Giallos tonally are very close to Scooby-Doo. And what I mean is that they follow the whodunit pace of a Scooby-Doo episode. So it's like, oh, there's a murderer, there's a scary monster, right? Anyways, so there's a big scary monster, right? So the scary monster in Giallo or Gialli is usually like an unnamed killer. And hold on, I gotta fix my white balance. Balanced. Anyways, so there's usually like a monster, right? And the monster in Giallo is usually like an everyday person, because Giallos tonally changed horror, right? So Giallo's tone is like, who the fuck is this guy in this mask with these black gloves? Because that is a huge trope of what Giallo is. And this dude, you get red herrings throughout it, and then like at the end of it, it's revealed, you know, they unveil the mask of the killer. Scooby-Doo. It is Scooby-Doo as a movie genre. And now that you understand that, you understand Giallos and why they are fun. But why are they so culturally significant? I am glad you asked that. So, like I said, horror in the 1950s, 60s, pre-Giallo was contingent to the Hays Code. The Hays Code, I've talked about it before on this channel. Essentially, William H. Hays, we don't fuck with him heavy. He was on some turbo racism. He was on some very conservative idea of what movies can be, and it's why things like the Creature from the Black Lagoon is technically like a G-rated joint, right? So when you think about how our cultural standards and our cultural norms influence the movies that we watch, right? So Giallo, Italy, Italian horror, right? What changed in Italy that influenced Giallo? So essentially, fascism ended. So people were a lot looser when it came to sex, violence, and just more debauchery, which is why the Italian paperback novel genre of Il Giallo Matadori took off. I love saying that. Let's say it with me, audience. Il Giallo Matador. All right. Also, let's just say a title of a film, a Giallo film in Italian, because it's nice to say. Say it with me, class. Profondo Rosso. Profondo Rosso. Deep Red. Directed by Dario Argento. We fuck with Dario Argento heavy. Anyways, let's get back to the topic. I am losing my own pace and track. So, Giallo was a big deal because it changed the idea of sex and violence on screen. And you're gonna be like, no it didn't. You had Alfred Hitchcock dropping Insanity, dropping I Can't Stand Upright, dropping the AVs, which is the scientifically correct term for birds. That is correct, audience member. But the thing is that the difference between Giallos and a Hitchcock film is that while they are both thrillers, like I said prior, or I may have not said this prior, I don't know. That being said, Giallos focused on the kill, the violence, the murder. As Lana Del Rey would put it herself, it was ultra violent. Why'd I try and sing that? Anyways, as Miss Lana Del Rey would put, Giallos were filled with ultra violence, and that was a lot of the appeal of what Giallo brought to the table in the horror genre. Now, like I said, days before Giallo, right? Giallo, we are at the time of Giallo right now. So Giallos really bought like the fact that like shit could happen every day into horror, right? Horror used to be fantasy, more whimsical, more folk tale, right? But now it's like, oh snap, bro, little Jimmy down the street, he gonna stab you with some lefty scissors. And that's what Giallo was. But like, it's more than that. Giallo has a certain aesthetic, one that I would call bubblegum horror, but not really, because that isn't what defines Giallo, but it's a large part of what it is. And this is thanks to Mario Bava's work on Technicolor film. So Mario Bava did a ton of set design for various other films before. You can see this in Arteria and Ulysses, and this is cited in the book about Mario Bava, All the Colors of the Dark. I think another great example of Mario Bava's like camera work and what he did for film and filmmaking would be in like Hercules and like the Dark World. Like Hercules in the Dark World is a really, really good example of this. Yeah, so Bava's set design, I just totally kicked my whole tripod. Mario Bava's set design and what made his films unique is that they were informed by the Technicolor process. So the first Giallo, it's time, bro. Bing, 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 bing. Giallos are starting. Okay, so the first Giallo is called The Girl Who Knew Too Much.
Chi è che urla? Chi è lei? Ma cos'è una trappola? Ma cosa dice? Che trappola? Mi lasci passare! Mi lasci passare! No! Soffrire tutti, odiare, dimenticare cosa sei stata per... It's like a reference to like Hitchcock's The Man Who Knew Too Much, right? So it's in black and white, and you're like, oh, I thought you would talk. We're not getting to that film. I will talk about that film in like 2 seconds, I promise. So the pacing and the tone and the Scooby-Dooism is set, right? And there's sex and there's violence, right? But there's not yet. It's a cool film. It's a little bit, it's not really my cup of tea. It's all right. But yeah, and I also would like to say that there are 2 other films that are technically cited as the first Giallo. So the first adaptation of Il Giallo Matadori would be 1945's Obsessione. So why is Obsessione not cited as part of the larger Giallo movement? And that's because it doesn't follow the stylistic tropes of Giallo as a whole, because Giallo is a movement that is rooted in aesthetics rather than like political themes or things like that, right? So when you look at like Obsessione, or there's this other film, but there was another Giallo adaptation that was like a student film, but like it's literally like there's no film reels of it anymore because it was a student film. So yeah, this dude would also, the guy who directed it, would also go on to work with Mario Dog, I have so many fucking. Let's talk a little bit about La Rosa un Sovo Strapo, the girl who knew too much. So following in 1961, Bava was taking a rest following a nervous breakdown. This was caused due to overworking on what is known as Bava's secret film. So Bava like had a like he was the dude you would go to, right? Like if you needed some special effects, bro, you need to get this shot popping off, you would call up Bava, because Bava was that nigga. Like Bava really had the eye, really knew what he was doing, greatly talented individual, right? So he did everything from effects to directing reshoots, as well as being a director of photography, and he was really cold with it. Like he was cold with his directing. Also, I would like to note that, like, yes, Bava had directed many horror films at this point in time, which is why a lot of people cite what's it called, Black Sunday with the mask and shit as like, oh my god, this is the first Giallo, but it is not an adaptation or a thriller technically. Correction. So actually, Black Sunday was an adaptation. It was just not an adaptation of, say it with me, kids, Il Giallo Matadori. So Black Sunday is like an adaptation of this joint called VIY. Vivi, I think is how it was pronounced. It's a type movie, you should definitely check it out. It was bad loss for like a hot minute too. It's like an old folktale. It's got a blue cover and it's got a girl going. So yeah, correction. Black Sunday is technically proto-Giallo, which is really interesting because Black Sunday is in black and white. Why did I think it was in color? Anyways, yeah. Also, Bava did Bay of Blood, which is the first slasher film, and Bay of Blood was taking shots from like Friday the 13th, and there are other kills like that are directly lifted from Bay of Blood because that's how cold Bava was, right? So why do I keep kicking my tripod? Anyways, Giallo has like a very luxurious feel and look to it, as opposed to something like Hitchcock's Psycho, and the aesthetics are directly informed by Italian culture. The look of these films came from what was needed and not a want. A big Giallo, bro. The first real Giallo. We've talked about days before Giallo, but we haven't talked about the Giallo, the one that changes the game, the real game changer. All right, are you ready? Look at me. I'm so excited to tell you. It was called Blood and Black Lace. expecting that. That's that cinematic thinking, boy. That's that J.J. Abrams. That's that love exposure. That's that long day's journey into night, boy. And he got an intermission, boy. That's that Kubrick, boy. That's that Godard, that Bergman, boy. That's that cinematic mindset. Bro, you ain't never seen no intermission in a YouTube video. Boy, that's that Built Differently, boy. That's that Gone with the Wind. Let's get back to it. And it is a game changer for a lot of reasons. Like I said, Bava had a hand in working in film and behind the scenes for years prior, right? So Giallo and horror in Italy had a very specific color palette and tone that was informed by Technicolor filmmaking. And this is super, super important because Technicolor was a 3-color strip process, meaning that each, like when you shoot it, like it's 3 separate colors that then have to be developed individually and then layered on top of one another to get the color. Why is this important? Because you need a very certain type of lighting and a very certain type of set design and look for this to translate well onto film. And Bava, interestingly enough, when he shot Blood and Black Lace, shot in a lighting process that was similar to black and white filmmaking. But yeah, so Se le donne di Paciano, or Blood and Black Lace, was shot in Technicolor. It was not something that was, again, used for thrillers. It used the same lighting style as black and white, which gave it a certain pop, and was not well received in Italy. That is the fun fact of Giallo. And that is why Giallo is so interesting, because you see, Giallo is technically kind of, I wouldn't say an outsider film movement, because over time, like yes, Giallo became that bitch. But when Giallo started out, Giallo was not popping off. And fun fact, so like I said earlier, a lot of Giallos were being translated in the West. And in the West, they would go to what is known as a grindhouse theater. Now, anyways, grindhouse theaters were a 24-hour theater that was specializing in more independent films and independent cinema that is outside of like the general lexicon and wheelhouse of what normal people would consider decent, right? So it was more sex and violence, essentially. That's where Giallo flourished, and it was an underground film making movement. Like I said, when Giallo was being translated in the West, there were a lot of quirks to it. Giallo is very campy overall. So what I mean by being campy, like Susan Sontag said, it could have been naive camp, it could have been intentional camp, but tonally, these things are kind of fun. Especially because actors spoke their native tongue. Like, so you had actors of different, like, language. Like, there was an avid language barrier on a lot of these sets. So they just had, like, the American actor or the British actor says lines in English, while the Italian actor would say their lines in Italian, and then it would all be dubbed over in whatever tongue or like language it was being translated to. It was actually really interesting when you think about it. So it feels like watching Pokemon in 2001.
Help! Help!
Hey, there's someone in there. What's the matter?
Help me! I'm locked in and someone's following me!
Don't worry. I'll climb over.
Hurry! Hurry!
It's too high, lady. I'll go over to the main gate.
No! Please don't leave me! Someone's after me! They're going to kill me!
Nothing's gonna happen.
Yes, it will! Oh, please! Oh, my God, no! Ah!
Let's talk about like the distribution changes with a lot of these Giallo films. Giallo was a big deal, and it wouldn't be a big deal. And Giallo was a big deal because it was part of the underground culture. Yeah, the culture underground, baby. The Underground Railroad for films, bruh. How we gonna see it?
Got something that might interest you.
I don't know, because Tenebrae was actually considered a video nasty by like the British coalition, so you couldn't even see it in Britain. Wow. And when it was released in America, Tenebrae was called Unsane, which is a stupid name for a movie. And the American market actually got most of the like edits of any version. Or something like Don't Torture a Duckling was dubbed in English but never got released in the US. And it's really interesting kind of the history of Giallo films, because why do I call them Giallo? That is not correct. They're called Il Giallo Matadori. Anyway, so the history of Il Giallo Matadori is very interesting. It's very peculiar because people like Tarantino have tried to, or in like 97, I believe, he tried to like bring over, I think, Don't Torture a Duckling, but like they was like, why the fuck you want to do that? Stupid American. And like they said no, so he couldn't do it. And it was really like a lot of these films for like the 90s and before, people like Arrow and Vinegar Syndrome and Seven and a lot of these companies, before they started releasing Giallos, they were either heavily cut and edited when they were brought over to the US, or just completely like not brought over.
Now, if the movie's rated PG-13, it might have some material in there that Mommy and Daddy might not like some of the young kids to see, so Jody might just have to stay home. Bye-bye, Jody. Now, if the movie's rated R, then it's going to contain some adult material, in which case a dad who's got a lazy tummy will probably want to stay home. But if the movie's rated NC-17, that means that kids can't get in. Only adults can get in. Mom doesn't want to see adult movies. But Grandpa was in the Army, and he's not bothered very much, and so he decides to stay along with Sergeant Scruffy, who's just a dumb dog anyway. I hope that explains it. Now, back to the cartoon.
Or something like it's not Giallo technically, something like Phenomena, when it was released in America. It is an Italian horror film. It's by Dario Argento. It was called Creepers and was edited very heavily. It stars Jennifer Connelly, and that's the tea on that. And a lot of these films, because they were part of the underground culture, they weren't very scholarly, like this video, which took me 2 months to research. So, because they weren't a scholarly film, a lot of these Poindexters, like this Poindexter from the Pittsburgh Observer, would once say that, he did, this nerd geek from the Pittsburgh Observer called Torso another display of softcore sex, steamy violence that would have done better abroad. Thanks, Pittsburgh Gazette. Anyways, so you can definitely see a lot of the tone that and how people received Giallo films. So going back to our timeline of Giallo, let's get into another game changer, right? So now Blood and Black Lace has been released, right? Another really big game changer is The Bird with the Crystal Plumage by Dario Argento. Because Dario Argento, he said, I was not copying Mario Bava's homework but you can tell like it was heavily informed. And what's really interesting is that while it wasn't Blood and Black Lace that kind of started the wheel for what Giallo would be, it was Bird with the Crystal Plumage, which was directly...
I was inspired by expressionism, very lot of course, by Alfred Hitchcock and by Ingmar Bergman for horror films, and like style to shoot. I have a big influence in me the French films, the Nouvelle Vague. It's very important for me, like to tell the stories, how to tell stories. It's, also Fellini, it's an inspiration for me, very important. Like because Fellini also it's inspired by our dreams, his nightmares, and something
influenced by Blood and Black Lace. Even though Dario would not admit it, I feel like I have a citation for this. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention Blood and Black Lace was borderline lost till 1999. Thank you. I do not have a citation for the Bird with the Crystal Plumage thing, but like, yeah, it's kind of obvious because like you compare them side by side and you're like, oh, anywhoville penis. Oh, Giallo. Like what is the lasting impacts of these Italian horrors, right? These Giallos. So the lasting impact is that we would not have the slasher movement without giallos, and that is not cap. Because if you look at Halloween, The Masked Killer, the opening POV shots, Friday the 13th Part 2 rips 2 kills directly from Bay of Blood, which is actually cited to be the very first slasher film. And slashers follow the sensibilities of American taste more than Giallo does. So Giallo is a very luxurious, very scandalous, very sexual, very upper middle class, beauty type film genre, right? So perfect example, while technically it is not an adaptation, but it follows the stylistic tropes of Giallo, being a black-gloved killer whose name we do not know, a long yet romantic title with lots of verbs and nouns, somebody who is framed and is being chased, and the witness to a murder, right? So these are various tropes in Giallo films. I don't know if I outlined these earlier, that's why I'm doing it now. But if you look at Four Flies on Grey Velvet by Dario Argento, this film was actually, this is the most insane thing. These niggas came up with the title of the film and then like reverse engineered the movie, which is like, it's a hard title, bro. Four Flies on Grey Velvet, bro. That's a lot of description. And that's kind of why they're campy and fun. And like, yeah, Giallo titles have like a lot of these tropes, with my personal favorite like Giallo title being Your Vice is a Locked Door and Only I Have the Key. Nigga, what the fuck? That's the most esoteric title. And Giallo's got like so popular. Like they were like the biggest hit. You had Lucio Fucci, Mario Bava, and of course Dario Argento. And I'm probably forgetting a name or two, and I'm sorry to the other directors. So yeah, like I was saying, Giallo super popular. Like bro, shit was popping up, bro. So it was literally getting parodied, and in '77 they dropped a film called All the Deceased Except the Dead. And yeah, listen, man, Giallos are like the tightest horror films you can watch, and this is me leveling with you, right? But like, Giallo's kind of faded off until the 80s. You have something like some of the best Giallo work I'd consider would be like in the 80s and the 90s, especially because you have opera, you have Tenebrae, Profondo Rosso, you have the one about like the stage play. I forget the one. It's not opera, it's the other one. Yeah, and you have like the one with like, I had a brain fart. Any Whoville penis, yeah. And then like there are like American films that kind of like follow the pacing and tone of Giallos. My personal favorite is The Eyes of Laura Mars, which is like, it's a little bit magical, but like, yeah. And then you have a lot of like Giallo films that don't really get like the credit for being Giallo, but like stylistically and tonally follow like the pace of a Giallo. So something like A Psych Out for Murder is a really good example of that. Please go check that one out. It's probably one of my favorite like films, just ever. Favorite film ever. Yeah, Giallo wouldn't become popular until 1968. I have a lot of notes. A lot of them are the same notes. I'm not gonna lie, it's a lot of notes. I wanted to do a good job. But yeah, man, like, I don't know. Sorry, I wasn't looking in the camera. I don't know. Giallos are like really tight, and there's something like really near and dear to my heart. I like adore them, and I feel like they don't get enough love, and there's not like a ton of, like, even doing research was kind of hard, because it was like, here's this like old blog post from like 1984 on like my fucking GeoCity site that like is barely working in the contemporary internet. It was a lot of digging to find the information I have. I really want to shout out Video Watchdog and their fantastic book, All the Colors of the Dark. I paid money for that. I really don't. This is the first time I've invested in research. So, and it really did contain a lot of like eye-opening information. It's all about Mario Bava. I wish it was about Argento. Sorry, I prefer Argento. Shouts out opera. But yeah, and it's really cool because like once you understand giallos and like how important they are, you can kind of like see the giallo renaissance that's been happening. So there's that one like magician movie that came out. I don't know the title. I'll put the title behind me. And you have something like Bodies, 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 which really does follow the pace of a giallo film. Like, I'm not capping. I'm not kidding. And go watch Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. Like, besides, like, the killer, the masked killer part, and, like, the POV shots, like, it is essentially a giallo film. And, yeah, like, it's really cool because, like, giallos are single-handedly the reason horror movies are what they are today. Like, we would not have slashers, we would not have kind of the more everyday sex and ultra violence that we have today in horror movies. And giallos are very fun and they're very campy and they're not scary. Like that's the thing, they are at their core more of like a mystery. They are whodunit mystery joints, bro. You really watching them being like, damn. And the twists and turns and the red herrings and like, yeah. So thank you for watching, and thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend some time with me. I am, as always, greatly appreciated. Why the fuck I gotta burp? Anyways, I'm greatly appreciative. I am so immensely thankful to my Patreons and for you, the viewer, for even making it this far in the video. If you like what I do, please consider supporting me on Patreon. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to give you guys links to other videos. They're going to be behind me, to my left, to my right. I will also... what was I gonna say? Oh, I'm gonna go edit this video. Yay! Gonna go edit my video like a responsible YouTuber, because I don't normally do that after I make a YouTube video, which is kind of frustrating, but I'm gonna go edit my new video. So, thank you guys so much.